Recording in progress.
So good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the April 7 meeting of the Southborough Select Board. First item on the agenda is public comment, and it's an opportunity for members of the public to comment on an item that's not on the posted agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to offer public comment or online? All right, so seeing none. The next item on our agenda is a presentation by Tony Roselli of Roselli and Associates on the audit conducted for fiscal year 2025. And Brian, do you want me to turn it over to you before you?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. It's just real quick. This is Tony Roselli of Roselli, Clark and Associates. So we've had Tony on board for 6 years now, Tony, I believe, somewhere right around there.
I think this is the fifth year.
Fifth
Yep.
year? Okay. Yep, so some of you may be familiar with him, but he usually gives a somewhat concise presentation that we can take a look at and see the results for June of 25 and any of his thoughts on anything that he noticed in the audit or suggestions for the town to, to act on. So with that, you can take it away, Tony.
Yeah, did you folks have the presentation up or?
Yes. It's going to be up in 1 second.
Yeah, it's easier to follow with the presentation.
There we go.
So, so like Brian said, my name is Tony Roselli. I'm a partner with Roselli, Clark and Associates, and we've been doing the audit for the town this is the fifth audit that we've recently completed. So tonight, I'll talk about, some of the economic trends in town, where it seems like the town is going economically, reserves, things like that. We'll talk about your bond rating, which you just went through a pretty vigorous bond rating process last year. We'll talk about OPEB, which will be interesting. There'll be some interesting discussion on that tonight that I'd like to spend a little bit of time with. We'll talk about your pension, which is through the county, the Worcester County pension system. Then we'll have some informational items, some observations, and then I put questions at the end, but please feel free to ask questions as we roll. So let's get into the second slide. So a lot of you have heard this spiel here, but for the folks at home who haven't and new folks at Town Hall, I like to go through what do we do here? What is an audit? Well, an audit, we have to follow what's called the Yellow Book. It's the Government Accounting Auditing Standards, and it's set up by the GAO in Washington. So it's called the Yellow Book because it has a yellow cover, but basically it's a book of standards that we follow when we do an audit of a municipality. Municipality is defined as one that receives federal funds, whether it be a school district, a town, a city, a water district, whatever it may be. If you're receiving federal funds, you fall under these audit guidelines. It requires a review of internal control over your major transactions. And the major transactions are payroll, cash disbursements, and receipts. Those are your three major transactions. So we do an internal control review of those transactions. We look at risk assessment. After we've gone through the internal control, we establish what's called a risk assessment. There are other areas that are risky that may require enhanced procedures. Is the town in a low-risk situation, a high-risk situation? And from our perspective, I can add right now that we're in a fairly low-risk situation in Southborough. You folks have got a very good internal control process that's followed and monitored. Next bullet is single audit. Single audit is required when you have federal funds. If you have federal funds over $750,000 through 25, it jumps up to $1 million in 26. So if you have federal funds of over $1 million, from here forward, you'll be subject to this federal fund audit, which is called a single audit. And then lastly, when we've gone through all this, we decide, do we have a clean opinion or do we have a qualified opinion? Qualified opinion means we found something that we don't like, a disagreement, an accounting principle that's not being followed, internal control issues, And when we have a qualified opinion, we have to insert that into our opinion. Southborough got a clean opinion for the fifth straight year under our audits. And then lastly is the report to governance, which is basically a report that goes through kind of everything I've just told you. It communicates all that and then also outlines the bullet points of observations, which you're going to see in these slides that follow. Any questions so far, or are we okay? So we can start with reserve balances. And your reserve balances, what I use as the definition of reserve balances is in your GAAP, generally accepted accounting principle, financial statements, not your Division of Local Services financial statements, your GAAP, which is what Standard & Poor will use to do your bond rating. They define your reserve balances as your undesignated general fund balance, which approximates free cash typically. So it's your undesignated general fund balance, plus your assigned fund balance, which are your encumbrances that you're going to use in the following year, plus any stabilization funds. So you combine all those three and you come up with the reserve balance as defined by Standard & Poor. And you can see that since 2017, it's basically had a straight trajectory upward. That's synonymous with basically what's going on in the economy. Receipts are, the economy is fairly robust. We've got had a really good string of economic activity. There was the dip during the pandemic, and you can see 2020. There was that slight dip on the chart. Otherwise, this would be a straight uninterrupted chart. It's also a function of your taxes that are being collected, which Southborough does a very good job, 99 to 100% collected. If you're rounding, it's always very close to 100%. So all's very good on this front. The reserves are going as good as could be expected. So we can go to the next slide. I compute a reserve ratio based on that calculation that I just described. The reserve ratio takes the number that I described on the previous slide and divides it by your total general fund expenses. Southborough is, looks like around 12%. I think it was 11.8. The high metric for S&P is 15%. The state average is about 10. So you're above the state average. You're a little bit below the high metric, but you have other things in your S&P calculation that help that process. So you don't have to be at the highest metric of 15% to still qualify for your AAA, because there's other factors like the wealth factor and management policies and different things that go into the bond rating. Any questions so far? Okay, we can go to the next slide. And this kind of summarizes your reserves. They were 11.7%. They increased from 9.4%. And why did that happen? Well, your local receipts exceeded your forecast by 2.2 million, and your expenses were under budget by 1.8. So you had a $4 million favorable variance, and that was offset by the planned use of free cash of 3.3. So your fund balance went up about $700,000 or $800,000, and that moved your percentage from 9.4 to 11.7. So that's kind of how we got to where we are on the reserve ratio. And like I said, the reserve ratio is slightly greater than the state average. And right now you're in a tier 2, but you're close to a tier 1. You're in the middle. And correct me if I'm wrong. I hope this hasn't changed, Brian, but you're still a AAA with Standard & Poor. I don't hear Brian, but I assume that is still the case at this point.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, usually you have like a rating, and I wasn't sure where my timing was on this, so hopefully that's still in play. What that tells the investment community is Southborough is a very safe investment. You have the highest credit rating of AAA. The investors aren't going to get the highest interest yield, but they can know that their investment is very safe in Southborough, and that's what the AAA represents. Okay, any questions? Bond rating. So we talked about all this. Now we talked about bond rating a little bit. How do we keep that bond rating? Conserve free cash for one-time items. And what I tell my towns is, hey, if we have a bad snow year, S&P's not going to mind if you spend your free cash on some extra snow removal. If you have some capital, S&P's not going to mind if you're spending your free cash on capital instead of borrowing. In fact, they do like that as long as you're maintaining your reserves. And when you do spend free cash like you did last year, 3.3 million, put measures in that will replenish, like forecasting your revenues conservatively, enhancing your revenues where possible, and monitoring your budget so you can turn back a lot of funds, at the end of the year. Keep preparing long-term financial projections, enforce your financial reserve policies, and continue to keep an eye on OPEB. Those are the things that lead to maintaining that AAA. Just a menu of items that check it off at the end of the year. Did we forecast correctly? Did we return revenues? Did we monitor our budget properly? If you've done all that, you should stay at a AAA. Okay, next, unless there's questions in that whole thing. Okay, this is important. This jumped out at me as something we need to think about. So your liability, your OPEB liability increased, and I think you had a couple of weeks ago, you may have had your actuary on speaking. Don't know if she touched upon this or not, so stop me if I'm repeating things, but your liability went up to 54.4 million. It increased by 11.4. And I know you folks always have a very good discussion on OPEB. What can you do? How do we help this? I think you even talked about doing, can we do bonds? Can we issue bonds for OPEB? And so I know you guys are interested in how to make OPEB better. Well, unfortunately, it went backwards in 2025. So I went to the actuary's report. They usually provide a nice summary of what happened and why. So there was a loss based on unusually high medical plan premiums, and that's synonymous with what's going on everywhere. So it's kind of unavoidable. Medical expenses are going through the roof. The inflation is causing these to go up. It's really been it's been a problem. It's a problem in a lot of places. So that's not anything you can really control to any great degree. But that's one of the reasons why your OPEB liability went up. The other is there were active employees who were hired that weren't part of the census the last time you did it. They must have just missed that cutoff. So you have extra employees. That's also driving that liability higher. And then, good news for the old folks like me, less retirees are dying. Medical is much better. The advances are great, and retirees are living longer and longer. So your retiree roll is getting bigger as you go. In fact, the average age of your employees is 48 right now. So that's only going to get bigger and pretty quickly. So those were your things that caused your liability to go up. Some of the favorable things, or one of the favorable things, was you earned almost $500,000 on your OPEB plan investment. So that helped mitigate some of those increases. Your discount rate is still almost 6.5. That's what it was in the previous year. And you got about $4.6 million in the fund. So I'll open this up for a discussion if you want one. I know you just had probably a 2-hour OPEB presentation a couple of weeks ago. So, let me know how you want to handle this if you have any questions.
I have a couple of questions. And one of them is for Brian, which I had sent you a list of questions about sort of the status of OPEB. Could you just give me a quick update on where we stand in getting a response?
Yeah, we talked to the owner, Linda, who Tony knows well. She's really good. We talked, the town administrator and myself spoke to her last week, sometime last week?
Last week.
Had to be because it's Tuesday, yeah. So we're coordinating with her, your questions and some questions that we added on, and she's gonna come back and herself and address those issues.
Do you have an E ETA?
Couple weeks, probably 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would hope maybe the first meeting in May.
Okay, I mean, I'm short, so I'd like an answer.
No,
before I
that's
depart.
why I said
Yeah.
first meeting in May.
All right.
And I
Good.
think, just so we don't lose track of it, because that was a, a really important point that was kind of maybe not front-loaded in the report, was the increase during the kind of post-town meeting between, where there's that kind of a quieter period where the board can think about some longer-term things to do. This is definitely something that I think we should think about.
So, Mark, I would think you guys could get the answers by the 28th and not wait till the May meeting.
That's true. Yeah, no, the 28th.
Yeah.
We can work with her to try to get that for the 28th.
Yeah, okay.
That's
All
the
right.
next meeting.
Yep, okay. The second question I have is, our OPEB and our other, and our pension obligations are really a form of debt. And we don't really treat them the same way we treat debt, but they clearly are, they have all of the attributes of debt. And it seems to me that to the extent that we talk about the town's debt and debt service, we ought to be talking about OPEB and, our pension obligations as a form of debt when we think about the total indebtedness of the town. And then the third one, I'll just mention, as I mention it every year, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the town's debt does not include our debt obligations to the regional entities that we participate in. So, for example, Algonquin or Assabet or any of the other, we're about to join a regional dispatch, and we have a regional health things. And I think we need to have a way of showing these, I hate to use the word off-the-books debt, because that's kind of, but I think we need to have a way of, whenever we talk about the town's debt, talking about those obligations as well, because they're as real as our pension obligations, and they're certainly a claim on the taxpayer. So I'll get off the soapbox now.
Tony, I think they mentioned that well, I think, pretty sure they do. And it's typically called overlapping debt. That's the term.
Yeah,
But they do.
yeah.
I think the
So-
rating companies get more into that than
The rating companies go out and find all your overlapping debt. They take your portion and they add it to town direct debt, and they add in now they're adding in your OPEB and pension. They're calling it debt, as the select board members pointed out. So when you look at debt on the town, it's not just what you borrowed. It's all these other things that are factored into it. That all go into your credit, evaluation. And certainly when we get to pension, I'll point out some things that I don't like on pension, just to kind of add that to your long-term planning as well. And but OPEB is certainly one that slipped a little bit here. Some of it, not anything you could have done about it, but at least we've alerted. The actuary is alerted, so now it's time for the town to come together and say, okay, we've got this in front of us. What do we need to do about it? But yeah, Brian, the indirect debt does get added in when S&P does their evaluation of the town.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had some other questions, but I can just save them to the end. So, because I know you got a couple more slides here about pension liability.
So the pension, all right. and I'm going to point to the number that's in the middle of the slide, 52.7%. So the pension laws went in effect. The mandatory contribution went into effect, I believe it was 1989 or 1990. The bill may have been out in 1989, effective 1990. That was 36 years ago. So in 36 years, Worcester County has managed to get to 52.7, about half. Yet the state expects Worcester County to get the other half funded by 2040, in 14 years. So there's a disconnect there. And there's 3 counties that are in this same kind of boat. So I don't know what the state's going to do, because I don't, if I was a betting man, I don't think 2040 is going to happen without significant increases in your contribution, your annual assessment. And Linda happens to be the actuary for Worcester County, so she could probably provide some color on this if you want to write that down in your notes as to what she expects to be seeing at Worcester County, what sort of increases in assessments to get fully funded. I think right now Worcester's trying to get fully funded by 2036 or 7. They have until 40 under the state regulations, but I think they're trying to do it by 36 or 37. And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the math that's going to get us there. So I wanted to point that not only are you seeing some things happening in OPEB, you're also starting to see some things happening here with the pension system. And I just want to put it out there for you guys to think about and get some questions answered, because all of this should go into your long-term strategic plan when you're evaluating the town's long-term obligations and debt. These 2 things really need to be front and center. And one of the things that some of the towns are starting to do that are in Worcester County are creating pension stabilization funds. Now, some of the counties have a way that you pay extra. I don't recommend that because it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. What I'm recommending that the towns do is create a pension stabilization fund. Wilmington's done this, for example. They're in Middlesex County, which has about a 51% funded rate. They put in an extra $1 million a year into the stabilization fund. They started it with $5 million and then started putting an extra $1 million a year into the stabilization fund. So if I took what they have in their stabilization fund plus what the county is saying their portion of the pension fund is, when I add those 2 up, it gets Wilmington, and they started this about 6 or 7 years ago, it gets Wilmington up to 80%. So they're in much better shape when S&P comes in and looks at them. They're in much better shape than what the pension shows, because they've got this pension stabilization. And what happens is, as Worcester County begins this big increase in this big run to 100%, and as the assessments go up, you can draw money from the stabilization account once it's been invested and it's earning money and it's gotten to a decent amount. You can start to drop it so you can flat fund your assessment, because you could be getting money from stabilization. And Westminster did the same thing with Worcester County. Westminster has done that. They started putting a lot of money in the pension. In fact, they're close to 100% now, based on what they put in the stabilization and the 52. So it's something I would recommend you think about, just to avoid what's coming 5 or 6 years from now.
Hi, Tony, this is
Any
Kathy.
questions on this?
Yes, this is Kathy Cook. Right now, I believe, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, that the annual assessment for Worcester County for us goes up 11.7% a year. So we are contributing a lot each year, more than the previous year. And so you don't think the 11.7 is going to get us there?
I'm looking at the math. If
I
you
thought it
get-
was supposed to get us there.
It's supposed to, but you've got hiccups in the market. It's supposed to get us there. It is, okay? People are living longer. retirees are getting stretched out. You've got, cost of living. You've got a bunch of things going on that we look at it today and we say the math works. And this is a great question for Linda when she comes in because she handles Worcester County. 11% is a big increase if that's what's projected. I just, as a person who's been in business for a long time, and I'm not an actuary, but just my spidey sense says that it might not make it if we get a couple of blips in the stock market that cause some problems and some other assumptions come off the tracks. So that's something I definitely would suggest you talk about and ask her about a pension stabilization fund. Does it make sense? Our auditor told us that it may make sense to set up a stabilization fund that will help us out later, to get to fully funded as our assessment goes higher and higher. And think about that 11.7% compounding though. It's, if you use today's dollars, 5 years from now, that's like a probably 30% from where we are now. Like it's probably that's how much the compounding is going to affect that also. So these numbers are going to be they're going to be fairly large numbers, and for the most part, you folks are stuck at 2.5%, year to year, with some increases in your departmental receipts here and there. But for the most part, your tax base of 2.5% is it. So you don't have a lot of room to work within. And,
Tony, we don't have any room. We've got really big capital projects
Yeah.
coming up. A new school we need to deal with. Our school we need to deal with. We've got a road bond we're about to do for $25 million. We're contemplating a wastewater treatment plant. We got all kinds of things. So stabilization sounds great. We have no money to do it. But who's the third county besides Middlesex and Worcester that is so lowly funded?
Essex. Essex is probably, I don't even know if Essex is at 50. I think they might be 49. Those are the three. Berkshire just hit 100%. That was a big celebration last year. They hit 100% of their liability. So now they can do some nice things. They can start looking at possibly reducing those assessments just to meet your annual service cost to the pension. So it's what happened here, I think, is at the beginning of time when you had a choice of picking different assessment paths, the lower one was picked. And I think a bunch of you are financial people. You know how the laws of compounding work. If you start off with a bigger number, you're going to have a huge number at the end of the day. If you start off with a low number, you are going to be that far behind as that compounds every year. And I think that's what happened with these three counties. To satisfy their constituents back at the beginning of time, they were choosing the lowest path on the annual assessment. And now what happens is you pay for it later. It's called kicking the can down the road, and you pay for it later. And we're starting to see it now, especially in those three counties. Most of the other ones I'm seeing are over 70, and some, like I said, the Cambridges, the Berkshires, they're at 100 or maybe higher. So clearly these three counties are behind.
Brian, can you add that to your list when you talk to Linda, since she's the actuary, and ask her, does she believe the path we're on is going to get us there?
Those three counties constitute a significant fraction of the population of the Commonwealth.
They
So,
do.
my guess is that the legislature might be brought to see the reason. I mean, your counsel so far has been that we need to continue raise taxes to cover our reserves. We need to raise taxes to cover OPEB, and we need to raise taxes to cover our pension liabilities. And I'm only partially being facetious as to whether we're going to have any money to pay for policemen and firemen and teachers. If there is a limit to how much we can tax.
Yes, no, there is. You do have ceilings on your
Well,
tax.
we have a ceiling imposed on us by the taxpayers as well.
Yeah.
We've also got a statewide problem as far as
Yeah.
the pension
Yeah.
program itself. I don't think they're going to do it, but there should be a look at this program. As far as the way it was put together, no one in the private sector has a pension like this ever anymore. So the fact that, you get a pension based on your highest 3 years, 80%, and you can move around for those 3 years and all the games that get played. I wish they would take a serious look and try to reform the pension system itself, still give people what they should get, but get the waste and fraud out of it.
It is a little, when you start to get to be in your low 60s, everyone's got that date circled when they hit 80%. And if they see a job that's got say a $15,000 increase, they may move just for a couple of years just to get that percentage up. And it's really caused this musical chairs of moving around and trying to get your high averages. So I don't think they envisioned it was going to be like this, but some of these pension numbers that some of these employees are getting are enormous, and when they retire, I have a sense that the state they've already extended this twice. The 2040, it was 2032, then it went to 2036, and now it's 2040. So they've had some pension reform where they've extended it. I can probably see that there may be one more shot at that to maybe take it out to 2044. But again, you just keep kicking the can down the road. But it might be the medicine that these towns that are in these 3 counties need.
Well, it's really kicking it because we had planned on, when we got this fully funded or caught up, to then turn to the OPEB and start taking what we were putting in
That's
the
right.
pension, OPEB. So now you wait another 4 years, so that just keeps going up. So I don't.
That's right.
I don't see how we ever get there.
That's right. No, it's the cat chasing its tail. Really, it's a difficult the law. If you talk to the state, the financial people at the state, and say what's the number one financial problem, they're going to point to OPEB and pension. They're going to tell you that. So I'm not giving you anything that's not already being discussed, at the Capitol, and it's just good to give this information to you folks, because if there is something you can do about it, you take those steps, and if you can't, you just got to bite the bullets later, and hopefully everything falls into place and everything goes the way these actuaries believe they will go. Okay. All right. So some informational items we talked about. These are just reminder things just to keep up with your network security. I've had a couple of towns that got hit, and we've had this item in their report every year. Keep looking at your network. Keep looking at your network. And one of them just got hit last week with an email problem, and shut them down for a little bit. So keep looking at that. Make sure that those things are secure. Fraud risk. Just keep looking at your departments. I think a lot of cash is starting to become virtual now. So there's online processes. So it's not as crazy as it was 10 or 12 years ago. But keep looking at cash handling departments. Make sure controls are in place. Make sure the money's being turned over as it should be. Our audit doesn't extend to the small departments, so that's up to you folks to really put your arms around those items. And then long-term obligations we just talked about. Investment income, good news, $600K. So just 2 years ago it was 300. Last year you doubled it to 6, and you got 6 again. So the investment income is providing something here. Next slide. And then just macro climate, just bond market still volatile. Rates were up again today. I don't know if we're taking out bridges tonight or not, but the market was going wacky today. Oil prices were going wacky. So inflation could be rearing its ugly head. And then if you have a recession, then you've got stagflation. Now all those wonderful receipts, that curve that I did at the beginning of the slides, might not be as steep with some of the things going on, and you could run into some supply chain issues too, which will cause some inflation. But keep watching that, keep monitoring that, and do what you can for your constituents. That's my spiel. The good news is you got a great team. The controls are very good. They're working as planned. Any small thing we have, we just kind of talk about. We don't, go in and have these little bullet point things. If there's something serious, we communicate it. And I think from that perspective, all systems go. But that's my speech for tonight.
I've got a question for Brian, Tony. And this has to do a little bit with something that's in our draft financial policy. So Tony, this is like a little unfair because later on in the agenda, right, we have on our agenda considering these DOR financial policies, right? So one of them says under the annual budget process, part of it says through gradual year-to-year reductions, the finance director will work to decrease and eventually eliminate the town's longstanding reliance on free cash to balance the budget. So I thought that, we have been making planned use of free cash, and maybe I'm thinking of reserves free cash, and I don't know if that's the 100% the same thing, but we don't use free cash to fund operating expenses, but really for capital, and I think that's okay. And one of the reasons we've been doing that, right, is like part of the reason I think the reserves have increased is because of the strain. It's such a hard hiring climate. We have positions in a lot of departments that are vacant for a long time, so departments have budgets to pay for people. They can't hire people, and there's a lot of turnbacks, et cetera. So I don't know, what do you think about that? Like, I don't think we have had a long-standing reliance on free cash to balance the budget. Is that right, wrong?
Probably right. Tony, you probably don't know because you're not involved in the FY27 budget, but we relied on it a little more for that. So in the past, we've tried to have more, assign it to capital, like Tony recommends, or he mentioned. This year, we probably didn't do as good a job as we probably could have, because we've got about 2.7. We have a lot of free cash this year, Tony, so we used about 2.7 for the budget, and then the rest, another million, close to $1 million, in, for other things, including capital. So the split was a little unfavorable this year, but your point is.
So you went into operations a little bit.
Yep.
So for the towns that do use it for operations, what I have them do is go into is look at how they are doing year to date with their revenues and their expenses, and see if they can forecast. Because if you replenish it, so say you get to a baseline on free cash, and you can replenish it, the S&P is not going to have a problem with you plugging a problem and saying, hey, we use this one time and plug this problem, but we're replenishing it through our operations because we're having, we're exceeding our revenues. Our motor vehicle excise is higher. Our, departmental receipts are higher. Our collections are coming in better. We're doing, you don't have really a big tax lien problem, but for the towns that do, they're hitting their tax liens. So what I tell those towns is, if you're going to use them in your operating budget, just look at, is this going to harm you at the end of the year? And be prepared for that. And then make the decision. Okay, we're okay because we're using 2, but we're going to get 2 back, so we're going to be flat. But if we're using 2 and we're not going to get any back, now you got to say to yourself, is that a wise decision? And then you've got to, at least you're more informed. So I don't know if you went that deep, Brian, with that thought process before that was done.
Yeah,
or,
and we've always acknowledged that that's exactly the situation we were in. It sort of came in, went out, came in, went out, came in. But it's been more volatile the past couple of years. So it's, this year seems to upset the apple cart just a little bit.
Because it's so high.
Yes.
So Tony, I'm an accountant, so I talk like an accountant. I disagree with what you just said a minute ago. We absolutely do use free cash for operations year after year. Now, sometimes we do appropriate some of it for capital because we're trying to get the capital bought ahead of time. That's why we're doing it. But we do always very intentionally forecast local revenue really conservatively. So that's where it mostly comes from. This past year, a lot of it did come from turnbacks too. So that's why it's so high, is because of the turnbacks. The local revenue, we've always had a big cushion there. And so therefore, it does roll over year after year. But we absolutely are using the free cash in operations. I don't see how we can say that we're not.
Oh, no, we are,
Okay.
we are.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the free cash represents tax revenue that was collected from the taxpayers and was approved by the taxpayers based on essentially the promise that we needed this money for operational expenses. And when we have free cash, that's money that we took from the taxpayers that we did not need this year for the things we said we needed it for. And so there's sort of a philosophical reason to say, well, all right, let's at least use most of it for operational expenses in the following year, because that's what we told the taxpayers we needed this money for. We never say to the taxpayers, we need a little extra because we need a cushion. There's no line item in the budget that says, this is the cushion. Well, there's one little one, which is the reserve fund. But, so, I think as, there's the accounting niceties and they're important, but I think also, what we communicate to the taxpayers about, why we're taking their money, because we are in fact taking their money. They don't have a choice about it once town meeting votes. So I think there's an important reason to use these funds essentially in the spirit to which they were raised.
But if the free cash is relatively the same year to year, you aren't doing that. The first year, yes, but from that point on, you're not. It's going in, it's going back out, so it's a net of zero. I don't think, we have no stabilization, as you know, Tony, and that was done intentionally.
Yep.
Almost 2 decades ago. The advisory committee at that point decided that it was inappropriate to have a lot of stabilization. It should be in the taxpayers' hands and let them decide when to put it back in. So we haven't had, but $600,000, $700,000 in our stabilization, which is another reason that we think that the free cash is important, because we don't have stabilization. So if something goes wrong, we got a problem. But as long as that free cash is relatively stable, you aren't raising more taxes than you need to spend for the year, because it came in as a surplus and it goes out with the same number. So other than that very first year, then it should not impact the current year taxpayer at all if it's relatively the same.
Right, and the S&P doesn't have a problem with that process that you're describing. That if you're planning on using it operationally and it gets replenished, and they see that in your 5 or 7 year forecast, they're going to be okay with that because you have a plan. If they see that you're going to use $2 million a year and it's going to go to zero in 3 years, they'd have a big problem with that. But that's not what you show them. So that is the way you manage your reserve. You use it, you replenish it. You use it, you replenish it. You don't push it up to 30% like some of the other towns. That we audit, we see numbers up around 25, 30%. You don't push it that high. You keep it right in that 10 to 15% range that your bond people are happy with, and that seems to work for you folks. So just keep an eye on that when you're doing this this process. Keep an eye that doesn't get disrupted, that ratio.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I just want to say again, thank you, Carla, thank you, Brian, for what you do. I mean, the this clean report, the fact that I think they end up with no audit exceptions year after year is truly amazing. I know how diligent you are as a town accountant. I know how you want everything to be perfect. I know, Brian, how well you look out things as far as making sure that we don't do anything crazy. So I appreciate both of what you do.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, and have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next year. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Yep, bye-bye.
He is a good auditor. So he knows how to talk out big picture. I mean, he did a better job on OPEB than the OPEB people did, by far.
I agree.
Better, yes, much better.
All right, so Attorney and Chair's report, one item, just want to remind everyone about the employee breakfast on Monday morning. Sounds like there's already healthy, good number of RSVPs.
7:30?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, we've got, we're getting the numbers updated today, and we've got we've got close to 60 people who've RSVP'd, which is, it dwarfs any number we've gotten before, so we should have a good turnout.
Good.
I also wanted to bring up a scheduling issue that Tim had brought to my attention. So the first, following the, second and, or first and third Tuesday of the month schedule, the first meeting after the election is planned for Tuesday, May 19th, and Tim is going to be in Europe then for work. So was wondering whether we could move that meeting to the 26th, would be the day after
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Well, I'm not here.
So I want to see that, I mean, I would be okay if moving this to see if it would work for other people. Another thing, Tim, you raised as a possibility is just move up the start time of the May meeting to like 6 o'clock rather than 7:30, you'd still be.
Yeah,
Instead of 6:30.
yeah, I'm gonna be 6 hours off, so if we started just a little bit earlier, I'd be able to participate longer, depending on how long we go.
So you're not, Kathy, you're not,
I'm not here on the 27th
all right.
or 26th, whatever. Yeah, I'm not here.
26th?
Yeah, I'm gone that week.
So maybe we'll just start to tentatively plan for the May 19th, we just start at 6 PM?
I can start at 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Marguerite?
all right, I don't have anything else for
Can do it.
Chair's report. Anyone have a numbers report? All right, and then, Mark, you have a town administrator's report?
Yeah, just a quick report. I may lean on Ms. Hale for this one, but as you know, we did get a one-stop grant for the wayfinding for improving our signage downtown. The grant pays for the study of it, not the implementation of it, but hopefully this can be a springboard to getting money for the implementation of it. And as part of this, we're working with Stan Tech, who was assigned to us by the state, and they have prepared a survey, and the survey is out and active. Vanessa, where can people find the survey? Sorry. I just wanted to find a way to involve you. This is really, Vanessa's been the one that's been shepherding this and everything, so rightfully, she should be the one getting the credit.
So it is on the town website. We've made contact with St. Mark's and Fay and other community organizations to help us with the outreach of the survey. We are in the process of having printed copies of the survey available as well at the Senior Center and Colonial Gardens and the library for those folks who might not have access to doing an online survey. So it's open through the end of this week.
So you can now, because Anita Reader was having trouble with her phone, so you can now get it, you can now do it?
A hard copy of it,
Okay.
yes.
Well, so you can't, forget hard copy, you can't go to the website and actually do it on a computer?
You can do it through the website as well. There's a QR code as well as a link directly to the site where the consultant has the website loaded.
Is there, the hard copies are in place now?
They're actually being delivered tomorrow morning. We were waiting for a printer-friendly version of the document. So they'll be delivered tomorrow morning to those locations.
Are we going to extend the survey since the end of the week is very
Yes, I
minimal
actually
time?
put a note out to our consultant about that today,
Okay.
so I'm sure that'll be fine.
So I guess I didn't quite understand that, the phases of this. So once the survey's done and the consultant has weighed in, right?
Mhm.
Spent the 30K on, this is what he thinks we should do, like where the signs go, what they should say, et cetera, the path.
Right.
Then we've got to pay for the money, we got to find the money to actually,
Correct.
and we're trying to get this all done before
Develop.
2027.
That's a tight time frame at this point, but, this phase pays for the study and the gathering of feedback and developing a brand and so forth. And then we would be looking for an additional grant to fund the implementation and the creation of the signs.
But can you get it fast enough to get done?
We don't know that yet. I think that's a stretch, but we're making an effort.
I know how hard you've been working on this, I know I have let you down for sure. So, okay,
Will we get the responses from the survey? Will that be public in any way, or will we at least get?
I believe so, yes, I'll confirm that with
Okay.
the consultant tomorrow morning, but I believe so, yes.
Sweet, thank you.
Okay.
All right, there's only one item on the consent agenda. Does anyone want to hold that? All right, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
second.
All those in favor? All right. Next on the agenda is the review and approval of financial policies, and Mark, please feel free to jump in here. I think basically, the background is, last summer, the summer before that, DOR provided us these.
I think this summer would be 2 years that we've had these. And so, if you recall, DLS did we wanted a policy review, and at the same time, I believe advisory said, well, doesn't DLS also come in and do free financial management reviews and review how you do what you do? And so we asked for both, and this is, we've not touched the financial management study piece of it yet. We started in on the policies, and a small group, excuse me, was put together. Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Pfaff representing advisory, Mr. Ballantyne, Ms. McAuliffe, and myself, and sat down and worked through some of these. We did bring in other people on some of these as needed. The policies that you have in your packet are the ones that are remaining for the board to approve. There are some suggested changes in there. I know that, I guess I will say that some of the conversations were not unanimous in the approach, and I think that some things were thought that should be brought back to the board for conversation. I don't know if you want to add anything?
No, I think that's right. I think there are a couple of items that clearly, that we're making policy, and this is the policy-making
Yeah.
body, and we wanted direction from the policy-making body.
So of the remaining policies to review and approve, which are the highlighted items on the list, right?
Yep.
And the ones that I thought, and please, everyone jump in here if you don't agree with this, let me know. The ones that I read them and I thought pretty standard, we could just approve them, are investments, ambulance receivables, anti-fraud, reconciliations, and revenue turnover. The ones I thought I had some points to talk about were annual budget process, grants management, and the senior tax work-off.
That's pretty much a good list for discussion.
Yeah, those three, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So does anyone have any suggestions or comments or questions they want to make about the other ones? Investments, ambulance receivables, anti-fraud, reconciliation, or revenue turnover?
Can we focus on investments for just a moment?
Sure.
I could have sworn we already approved this one. We got into,
We had
I'm fine.
one of the most recent town meetings, we had a
was an
warrant
article.
to adopt the
Yeah,
prudent
okay.
investor
Is
rule.
that what I'm remembering,
Yeah.
I guess?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, I
Brian.
thought it basically was, it said in a lot of words, like, we try to invest kind of conservatively, but if we're holding the money for a longer time period, you can take a little bit of risk, but not too much risk. It's not like a for-profit enterprise, it seemed pretty straightforward to me.
Okay, so Brian, right now, we invest OPEB, we invest the trust funds, and we invest CPA funds? Is that the three?
Yeah, Affordable
Okay,
Housing
and that's,
Trust.
and the firm in Worcester, what did you say?
Affordable Housing Trust.
That's being invested
Yeah?
in the market? I thought it gets just interest.
Well, that's an investment.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm talking about truly invested in the, diversified portfolio. There's those three.
Okay.
And that's the firm that's in Worcester that does it all under one big umbrella, and then, okay. So Al, you and Andrew are happy with this?
Yes, yeah, I think we were okay with that one.
The investments.
Yeah.
All right, so I move that we approve the policies for investments, ambulance receivables, anti-fraud reconciliations, and revenue turnover.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. So on the annual budget process, well, one comment. The red line edits here are really moving towards a procedure where the advisory committee is the sponsor of the budget article at the annual town meeting, and the select board and or the capital planning committee, or could make a motion to amend whatever, the advisory committee's warrant article. And that's not been our practice until this time, but, you read Massachusetts general law that suggests that is the way it's supposed to be done.
Agree. We've had this discussion, and I think absolutely there should be the sponsor. So a few years ago, Andrew Pfaff and I sat down with Jay Tellerman, and we were both still on advisory because we thought that's the way it should be. And what he said was, well, the select board controls the warrant, but obviously advisory's job is to recommend a budget. So there's a little bit of a issue as far as this goes. So I think this clarifies it. I think it should be them as a sponsor. It should be their budget in there. And if we can't agree with them, then we take it up on town meeting floor, right?
All right. There are parts of
You
this
agree?
where it refers.
I agree that is the process. Where we stopped looking at this one was that we wanted advisory's input.
I agree.
And we have not gotten that yet, so,
Andrew Pfaff.
we need advisory's input on the budget process if they're gonna be responsible for the budget process.
So I'm fine with this so far, but I agree, it's now should be in their laps to really look at it and come back and say that they agree or they don't.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, there are some things in here that I think are actually somewhat contradictory to the conversation we just had, like, the discussion of free cash.
Yeah, and that's another thing I
Yeah.
want to talk about. So
Yeah.
Andrew Pfaff has his hand up. You bring him over? And someone should just go through, one thing I see is sometimes it's called the advisory board instead of the advisory committee. So I should just make sure it consistently calls it the advisory committee.
What do you want to talk about, Andrew? Where is the contradiction with what we just heard?
Let's see here.
Yeah, on the third page,
Through gradual year-over-year reductions, the finance director, along with input from the finance team, will work to decrease and eventually eliminate the town's longstanding reliance on free cash to balance the budget. I mean, that's,
I don't necessarily agree with that.
it's exactly the opposite of what we just discussed.
Yeah.
No shame in putting it in there, it's just, we need to have a conversation, this one needs a little more work.
And I was thinking of, to just say, instead of that, to just say, the town will avoid using any one-time revenue source to fund ongoing services unless necessitated by exceptional circumstances. Any such use will require the finance director or the finance team to document a plan to replace that. You know, that's a more general statement. Andrew?
Sure. Andrew Pfaff, 50 Oak Hill, member of advisory. Yeah, so we did talk about this last night on our advisory meeting, that it's something that's on our to-do list, and I think Marcy was going to put on the agenda for a May meeting to kind of start the process of developing the process and making sure that it's good to go.
All right. What do you think about, Andrew, I don't know if you've been following this, there's a paragraph in this annual budget process that says, through gradual year-to-year reductions, the finance director, along with input from the finance team, will work to decrease and eventually eliminate the town's longstanding reliance on free cash to balance the budget. And that once that effort is successful, the town will avoid using one-time revenue sources to fund ongoing services. Do you think that language should be in the policy, or, because that's not really what we're doing right now, and I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
planned use of free
Okay,
cash.
but Brian, every year, and Mark, try to get us to set aside, they try to get us not to do this. Every year, they are trying to get us to take some of our free cash, put in stabilization. That's what Brian would like to see done,
All right, okay.
okay? So we're not saying get rid of free cash, we're saying not use free cash to balance the budget with, but you got to have reserves. That's where the S&P good rating comes from. So we got to have reserves someplace.
Yeah.
If you want that rating. So do you then fund a stabilization, and then when you got free cash, that's where you put it in, and it goes back? I don't know. So Andrew, would be interested to see what you guys come back with as far as that one paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, I think free cash should be, I mean, I think we should have enough one-time items every year from a capital perspective, or even stuff that's within the operational or general budget that's one time, that we should be able to earmark it against free cash. We also talked about a free cash stabilization to basically keep free cash at a certain percentage of our expenditures, so that on years like this where we were significantly over that threshold, we could put away some money that for the years that we were below, we could kind of release it. So it would have a self mechanism of using it, as opposed to just putting into a stabilization as a rainy day fund. It would just be there to basically level out our free cash and get some of this noise of going up and down. That's another conversation we've had before. That's something we should think about.
Well, I don't see the difference between that and stabilization, but whatever, I think that's semantics. But, you say one-time thing for capital. Yeah, we buy different capital items every year, but we still always have a, $1.5 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million capital budget. So I don't really care that it changes from this truck to that truck. So I don't see why we call capital one-time things. We're always going to have capital.
Right.
I think that was the conversation you had earlier. I mean, as long as you're using it and it's getting replenished, it's kind of indifferent whether it's one time or it's going against the operational. But if there is something looked at by our auditors or by the S&P that we just basically take the money out of our capital items within the budget and move it into that bucket, so be it. But I think it's more, to your point, of semantics. The only difference, I think, on the free cash stabilization is that we know right now we never use our stabilization account. Even going through COVID, going through issues where we might have released it, we don't. The free cash stabilization would have a built-in mechanism that says, if you're below this, we will pull money out. So it's just, not there to be built up and stored for safekeeping in the future.
Yeah, but that stabilization money is calculated on purpose. You go back and read the white paper that Mr. Butler put together. I'm not sure, Al, if you helped with that, but it calculated that. The 600 is there for a reason. It's like 3 months of what we need if something really goes down, so we would be able to call a quick town meeting and appropriate money. So that 600 has a reason to be what it is. But again, the reason we don't do this, we can't afford to do it. We need the free cash every year to try to keep the tax increase down to something halfway reasonable. So I wish we had lots of extra money we could really do these things with, but we don't today.
So, do you think that the policy should have the language that's reflected in here?
No.
Because you think we're just not really going to do it?
We're not ready, I think, let's get advisors' input.
Okay.
If advisory is responsible for the budget, they ought to at least tell us how they'd like this to work. And then, we can vote on this at another meeting.
Okay.
This is an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah. As somebody who's been critical of the budget process,
All right, so Andrew's heard what we said and can bring it back to advisory, and I'll also reach out to Marcy. So for grants management, the thing that I noticed in here that the policy said that we just don't do, and I think is a little impractical, is
I'm sorry, which one are you on?
grants
Oh,
management.
grant, yeah.
Okay, so, like, I think the main thrust of this policy is think carefully about accepting grants, because sometimes they're a hook,
Yeah.
they're like a backdoor way of signing.
They furnish the salary, then you got to pay for the
Right.
salary going
Yes.
forward. We've had that happen several times.
But there's
right?
also so many grants that are smaller, department heads apply for them every year, it's good, it's fine. The policy would say, all municipal grant applications must receive pre-approval by the select board or their designee. And any educational ones by the school committee or their designee.
Well, their designee could be the town administrator and the
that's what I was thinking,
superintendent.
too.
And, I think, I'm okay with that. I think, the instructions to the designee ought to be, you can approve them if there are no ongoing obligations or, above a certain threshold.
Yeah, if there's something problematic about it, I expect the town, Mark would alert us and we'd talk about it as a board. If you look on page 14, grant application, it says prior to filling any grant application, the town administrator will submit a meeting agenda item requesting pre-approval from the select board.
It's just the grant administrator.
Yeah, but that would mean like the department head who's gonna be supervising the, like, I don't think we need to,
All I'm
could-
thinking is some of the library grants are for like $150.
yeah, so,
It's ridiculous.
I don't know, we could just insert after pre-approval from the select board or its designee.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any comments on this one?
So I agree with you that we've got to be careful about too much bureaucracy here, but you do have to watch out for the two things. One is you end up with something you got to fund yourself going forward. You can't, you get it, and it's something you don't want to give up. And then second, a lot of times there's a match, and you want to make sure that we know where that match is going to come from, and we're not stuck doing a match after the fact because we didn't understand there had to be a match, and then it got approved, and now we got to fund the match.
I think,
So-
the other issue too is that, there's turnover, on this board, there's turnover on other boards. We've been very fortunate, I think we've kept most of our team, staff and everything together. But if you use a grant to buy a piece of equipment, this board changes over, some of the people who are overseeing this stuff and that change over. Next time that comes up to be purchased, it's going to look like we're simply replacing existing equipment. No one's going to remember that this was a grant that we originally got, and now it is considered something we're just going to continue to do. It's just a replacement. So, that's why I think there needs to be an understanding of when you're getting something, what your obligations are going to be moving forward and the expectations.
We actually have a bylaw on the books that says you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
I know the guy who wrote the bylaw.
About grants?
Well, yes, basically it says when you get a piece of equipment as a grant, you're supposed to go and make an estimate of what it takes to maintain that equipment.
Or when someone donates something.
Yeah, or when
The
somebody
board
donates.
accepts it as something as a
Yeah.
gift or something, then.
I had one question.
Yep.
Came from the great tractor kerfuffle of about 2002.
The what?
What?
Tractor?
The great tractor kerfuffle. I'm
Carla,
now showing my age.
I would really like to hear your opinion of this policy. If you would just, for a minute, because it impacts you.
This one, yeah. So, back in the day, when I was here, the first time around, I think we did go to the select board and departments would ask, you know, we're gonna apply for this grant. Is this okay with the select board? I don't know when it changed something else, but,
I think they'd like you to be louder.
oh, sorry. So back in the day, that was the
MO?
flavor of, and it was the process. And I don't know when it changed to not being
Well,
the process, but I don't know. I'm not sure how to fix it. I agree, you don't want the board to be bogged down with little things,
No.
like, you know, $19,000 grant for fire equipment or whatnot. If, you know, if it could be to Mark, and Mark would determine which ones needed to be discussed. I think,
But how many times have we sat here and heard someone say in their budget, well, this used to be funded by a grant, we don't have the grant anymore, and now it's in the budget. So that's what I think we've got to try to monitor versus the $150 grant Marguerite's talking about for the library, which is a
Right.
waste of our time.
right, right. I think there's, you know, work smarter, not harder, right? You have enough in front of you.
would you have any thoughts to contribute to this about how you would do it if you,
So I don't know if you want it to be maybe a checklist for the grant? Like, is there a continuing cost? Do we anticipate we would need to replace this? Maybe there could be some kind of checklist when it comes to a grant, if it's a certain dollar value, right? I mean, like a lot of the things that we obtain through ARPA and, you know, FEMA CARES, all that stuff, you know, ATVs, things like that, right? Are we going to see them again? And maybe these types of things that are on the grant, when the departments come and say, hey, we had this and it was a grant and now we need it, then it's
I think the bullets,
hard decision.
if you look in the policy, the bullets kind of give you that, it's not set up as a checklist, but these are the things, the factors to be considered at minimum.
Similar.
So if
yeah.
you go through and you're trying to make sure that it hits all of these points,
Mhm.
I think that may get you somewhere near where you.
Well, I also think that maybe speaking to the department heads from our level, having a department head meeting, and, you know, because there are times when I don't know about a grant until it shows up, you know, where the money comes, and, you know, so then once the money comes, I go looking for the paperwork, you know, so, yeah, maybe we can do it from us to the department heads. And we don't get a lot of grants, you know,
Outside of the annual ones.
right. I mean, the police get their typical grants, right, for overtime and things like that, and we expect those and we rely on them, you know?
So the annual ones are the ones I'm not worried about. It's,
Right.
Remember Putini, what we voted on, when he wanted, you know, he came to us and said, do you want me to apply for this grant that will give us money for, you know, 3 firefighters, for 3 years, whatever? And we said, well, then what do you do when that grant goes away? And of course, they
Right.
would pay for 100%, the 75, and then nothing, right? And then we would have 3 new people
Yeah.
that we were paying for, and we said no.
Yeah, Northborough's dealing with that right
Yeah,
now. too.
absolutely. That's what, there was a big article about it, so
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep, and, yeah, eight people. So I don't know if there's a dollar value, I think if it's staffing, probably, because that's something we want to keep an eye on with our FTEs, you know? But it's something that we could communicate to department heads too, to say, you know, if there's something, we don't want to discourage them from applying for grants either, you know? So,
were the body cameras a grant originally for the police department?
the body cameras.
They were a grant.
Yeah.
That was a great, yes.
So we did renew that through, I think it was ARPA or CARES or something. I think the original I might not have been here for, but they,
Yeah. the tension is, grants are something we want.
Right, well, you don't want to
So we
discourage
got to
it.
make the process reasonably lightweight,
Right,
but, it does strike me that, this board probably needs to know if it involves employment. You guys tell me if I'm wrong.
related.
No, I think that's one key.
One-
It
Yeah,
can be a de minimis that we shouldn't have anything to do
Right.
with.
Yeah,
Um,
or if there are ongoing maintenance requirements above some certain level, those are the two that come to my mind. Or, just those are the two big ones. The things that are going to create expenses for us down the road.
But the decision would be taken by Mark and you, whether to thumbs up or thumbs down a grant? I mean, that's tricky there, isn't it?
well, I think if it's FTE related, right, it should come before the board.
Absolutely, those things that fall outside the ordinary, if it's something that's going to affect FTE, if it's something that's going to affect the fleet, if it's something that's going to be a piece of equipment that isn't going to be just a nice to have until it dies, that it's something that we intend to incorporate into our operation, that's going to be a decision, I think, that the boards,
Yeah.
the board should weigh in on, because it's going to be part of our base.
And I don't think it's just people, I think maybe it's mostly people we worry about, but Marguerite, why did the library budget go up this last year?
Yes.
Remember, he said,
Programming.
we lost grants, we don't have this grant anymore, we want to keep doing this program that people like so much.
Yep. That's in miniature, but again, so it's sort of a big responsibility. But you'd know when you'd kick something over to the select board to discuss.
I mean, I think that the policy has enough just wiggle room in it or general language that it captures a lot of things we're talking about, like page 14, grant opportunity assessment. Well in advance of a grant application's date, the departmental grant administrator will assess the opportunity in consultation with the town administrator and finance director and the factors. One of them, the financial staffing requirements and stuff, so. I'm just trying to balance here, I think a lot of the things we're talking about are already captured in this document.
So you didn't change this one at all, Al, it doesn't look like?
Yeah, no, I don't think we didn't spend a lot of time on it.
Is there any way to add a thing to this?
Yeah.
Mark's point about ongoing, that it came from a grant. Is there a way that we could just add a piece of this policy that would say, it has to carry a designation going forward until a certain point? Because the police, the body cameras is a great example of that. We went into this program, now we have to have extra staffing to review this, which wasn't exactly part of the grant. It should be part of the bigger path of why you are doing this and what you need to do with this. But now you have this review process, you have more staffing needs, and then ongoing, it's a good idea to have body cams, but at the same time, there's a commitment to this. So maybe when those cameras would come due again, we would have an actual bigger discussion and say that this was grant funded, is this something we're gonna keep? Because there's a lot that goes into that sort of thing. So should there be a designation as part of this policy that it has to carry it to a certain renewal point?
I think that's really up to the board as to whether you want, and again, no board can bind, the next board
Right.
to decisions. But obviously, the decision was made that we needed to do this, and specifically the body cameras, I think it was something that was a great decision. Was very happy to work with the unions to get that in place. Has significantly reduced liability for the people that we serve, but also for the people who are doing the job.
Yeah, but Mark, we in
Yeah.
part have a second lieutenant because of that, because of all the
The additional
extra
administrative pieces,
time
I understand that.
and I'm not sure in fact, I'm pretty sure we didn't understand that up front.
It wasn't presented at town meeting. I remember sitting there in the audience, and it wasn't presented as the ramifications of accepting the grant. It sounded great that day. I heard it. I was like, why not?
Yep.
But that wasn't well understood at that town meeting.
But-
I'm just wondering more about, should we put in the policy a renewal date for when, whatever that item would be from the grant? It has to be, I'm thinking this should fall in the police budget, but separate from the police budget, there should be a separated line that says, it should be separated, and we should have a moment where we say, do we want to renew this particular line that was coming from a grant, so.
Do we want to pay for it ourselves?
Yeah, do we want to pay for it ourselves? Like, I'm just thinking, how do we get it separated at the right time? So that way we can kind of flag it as part of this policy.
So maybe part of the budget message for the, whatever year, we talk about if you're going to add anything to your budget, the why behind it, right? That's part of Brian's budget message. If you're adding new services, a little explanation of why,
Yeah.
if it's grant funded.
I just think up
call
front, we
that out.
gotta do a better job flushing this out. Now, I know that part of the body cam time is because they say defense attorneys ask for everything, and so maybe they couldn't really contemplate that, although we weren't the first to have body cameras. But I remember when Pam came in front of us to get the grant for the outreach coordinator, we did talk about what was gonna happen when that grant was up, and right now, we have an outreach coordinator on the payroll. So that was the output of that. We did end up with another person because of that grant expiring.
All right. Tim?
Tim Woodland Road. This conversation strikes me as crying out for a database that says, what grants do you have? When do they expire? What items are associated with it, so that you can actually forecast and not be reactionary. Right? I
We
mean,
discussed that
problem is,
before the
what-
meeting. Yes, we agree, we need a database with it all in there, and we don't have it.
I mean, putting it in a policy is one part of the problem, but making sure that you have a database and it's populated so that you know when to look, and you do look as part of the budgeting process, is the only way you'll get it under control. I think, this is supportive of what, Tim has been saying, and I think what Carla's been saying as well.
We do have a grant listing, but it's not detailed by, equipment or,
Yeah, but I mean,
line by line.
right, but as part of that database should be, what recurring or future expense, with a date when the grant expires. Maybe and then before that, you look and you say, okay, are we going to renew the grant? Are we going to have to do something else? I mean, it has to be planful. And right now, I think it's reactive, and I think that's what people are struggling with. My 2 cents.
I don't know if we can do this, but my question would be, could there be a spot in the budget itself that would say, like, this is a grant turnover location, and before it would enter the operating budget? So could we adopt a policy that says that, if you accept the grant and it has a recurring spend to it, I don't know if we can, I'm just thinking out loud. But if there's a recurring spend, could it be something we'd have to vote on as a separate thing before it becomes part of the operational budget?
There you just in with budget justification, that just comes up, period. I mean,
I want to flag it, though. I want it kind of like in its own little
True.
separate area.
but body cameras are good to have, and the outreach coordinator for the senior center is good to have.
I'm
I
not,
didn't say it wasn't, but
not saying they're
what
not.
I'm saying is,
But they're expensive, right?
it'd be nice if it was clear to
Well,
the
what about, I think
taxpayers.
Carla's suggestion of, in the
Database.
budget message, you direct each department flag any line item or expenditure that's currently being funded by a grant, so we can talk about whether we want to renew that. I mean,
and they do that a lot of times, think about the senior center, think about the library, but I still think this conversation's got to be had. No one seems to agree with me. Up front, when we're talking about a potential grant, what the long-term impact of that grant is, when it ends, what is going to be the impact on the budget, if there is any, so that we understand that with clear eyes before we say, go get that grant.
So are we back to if it involves a salary, kind of an FTE person?
That's one for sure, and that's
should
that's probably the more major one.
Come before, because that's a real reoccurring
Yeah. But the
charge, right?
body cameras were another one too,
Yep.
which ended up causing a whole lot more cost because of what I don't think we anticipated as far as all the work to do to review them, and the need to have a person who knew how to review them to do it.
Mm.
That was clearly one of the reasons that were given us for the second lieutenant, was the body cam work.
So annual grants can be in front of Mark, but if it's employee-driven or equipment-driven, the board would like to review that prior to.
I mean, Tim is right, this cries out for a database, and, would flag things automatically.
Are you offering?
Not tonight.
Okay.
I do agree with Kathy, so there are at least two people in the room on that. But the other thing is, you know, when you look at the body cam issue, beyond the grant for the equipment and the person, there's the ongoing cost of storage, you know, and that has to be traceable and all of that. And then there's the fact that the body cameras will wear out and they will have to be replaced. And therefore, you know, that whole thing is equipment.
I know that.
And we had the same thing with tasers. You know, I don't want to just pick on the police department. It's just, you know, they come to mind. And I think we've had some similar things in the fire department as well.
All right, so then do we want to vote on this policy tonight?
Can we hold this one, Andrew?
okay.
And just do the other ones, we've done them all. Keep this one so we can vote on that on the 28th after we have
Sure.
mused on it a little bit more.
All right, and then the last one left was the senior tax work-off. And I know, Al, you wanted to talk about that.
Sure, there are a couple of
Thank you,
items
Paula.
here. One of the first one is the income qualification. It's only a semi-qualification, it really is a priority, and it was at $45,000 just because it had been that way for a very long time. When I started looking at all of the tax relief things, it looks like, you know, the dollar number is set once and then it never changes. It seems to me that the household incomes should be consistent with other thresholds that we use, or that the town perhaps ought to have a uniform threshold for financial relief. And if you qualify for that, you're qualified automatically for all of these programs. And I know, for example, that we use $60,000 for the dump stickers. And so I think that there is a need for sort of and I've had conversations with Paul Sabelli, who does this, and the senior center. So I think there's a need to have a uniform relief standard rather than have, you know, these various different ones. And I'm not sure what it is. I think we could, but I think changing the wording so that the number was uniform was desirable. So I think, you know, we could change it to something on the order of that, you know, incomes under the town specified threshold, something like that. There's towns, does that make sense?
It does, but let's talk about where we are right now with that. We've actually made some progress. So Sarah Castle has led the charge to try to do exactly what you just said, so that, first of all, people don't have to apply 10 different times for things. They make one application, and it's done. So we've made progress. We've got food bank, youth and family services, rec, as far as the stuff that's done there. I think we've got that taken care of. We tried to bring in transfer station, and Bill had an issue with it. I forget what it was, but I agree. That's exactly what we should do. People should make it easy as we can possibly make it do, so they apply one time and they qualify for everything that we do that falls under the umbrella. So totally agree.
So then the second one was, there is, right now, there is 30 slots. And I think this
For the
is,
senior tax work-off.
for the senior tax work-off. And I think this is a real bargain. You know, and we ought to be thinking about expanding the number of available slots and probably expanding the way we use these folks. This is a program which, once we've satisfied all of the people who qualify on an income basis, that can go to anyone. And you know, the one that came to mind immediately is the advisory committee for several years has asked for help. Well, this program gets it's 133 hours of work that can be done under that program. And
It's $20 an hour, right?
it's 15, minimum
I
wage.
felt that we raised it to 20 at the last.
Now, the last time I checked, and I could easily be wrong, but when I checked with Paul, it was limited to the state minimum wage.
This says 15 in here as of 2024, Massachusetts.
Well,
minimum
But
wage.
Jim had an article, remember? So I think we did, but whatever it is,
Well, this is-
you're right, it's a bargain. There's no benefits, there's no anything else.
There's no, yeah, there's
$15 an hour,
no
20 bucks
pension,
an hour.
no OPEB, you know.
That's right.
So
No
we
health
ought to,
insurance.
we ought to be making, and, you know, in a lot of cases, we might get seniors with substantial experience that we could take advantage of. So, you know, to the extent, this is a bargain, you know, this is probably the best bargain the town's ever gonna get. And the other thing is that we now have the ability for people to substitute so that we can, you know, get volunteers from, you know, the high school for kids who are looking for their volunteer hours and things like that. So I think we ought to be looking at expanding the number of available slots.
Al, what would you expand the number to?
I would expand it to 40 or 50, you know, and there are a couple of other issues there that go along with this. You know, for example, I know that this is underused by the library, and you know, I was told I needed to put in a plug for getting the library to make use of this. I mean, this is a great deal for the town, and it's a good deal for the people who
Actually,
want to do it.
I think the library's going to give an award to their tax person.
So, and the second thing that came up, which is not really a policy matter, is that some of these folks will need computer support. And, you know, if we have old laptops sitting around, maybe that instead of turning them in, they might be made available. So I would raise it to either 30 or to 40 or 50 applicants, and I would leave the income limit as consistent with the other town programs.
One thing I would just want to think about before doing that is hearing, because I just don't know, how well the program is doing in terms of, you know, someone comes to do work on a senior tax workout program, and there's going to be someone that supervises them, you know, gives them tasks. And the more people you bring in as kind of, it's almost the equivalent of like seasonal, you know, labor or periodic. You're
There
spending a lot of
depends.
time to train, and then for a relatively small amount of
Today, I know
working,
that,
or is it?
I've heard some great stories about seniors doing tax write-off work, really, really productive, and
yeah.
did excellent work.
Tim, would you like a break on your taxes in return for a database?
Database, right.
Well, as an out-of-the-box thought, I was wondering why there has to be an income limit. Because, you know, I'm not personally interested in doing that, but, you know, people with the skills to do that probably aren't income limited, but there might be an incentive for them to contribute those kinds of skills.
Yeah,
I mean, why have an income limit at all if you can fill the positions?
It-
And
I
maybe
think-
the argument is that you say, well, if you have so many people, if you have more people than slots, then you prioritize based on need. But
Isn't that what this
that's
says?
pretty much the way it's written, is that people who qualify on an income basis are dealt with first, and then whatever is
It
left over.
says gives preference. It says gives preference.
Yeah, yeah, so they get preference, so.
So if you had someone like with your skills that came in and said, can I do the database, I think we would take you up on it.
Yeah,
All right.
So
yeah, so you can start tomorrow.
for the submission guidelines, though, should this be aligned with the youth and family
Yeah.
submission process? So right now, it's not, correct, the way it's written? So this should get aligned with that, and then whatever the income qualifications are of that process would apply to this
Yeah.
as
Yep.
default.
Yes,
It's
Okay.
like a common
All right, so
application.
then we won't vote on this tonight, right?
no, but this was one we wanted the board's feedback on.
So we narrowed it down to annual budget process, where I think we were okay with that. We just want to hear what advisory says, right? And then for grants management and senior tax workup, there's some other things we talked about. Does someone want to be the point person to work on like the next draft reflecting things that we talked about?
I'll take responsibility for getting the tax work-off resolved.
I can do the grants management if you want.
Okay. All right. Marguerite. Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is annual town meeting prep. We'll have a pre-town meeting, town meeting at the school. It's 9:30. Work? I don't think there's a lot to talk about. All right, and then the one thing I did want to bring up is we talked a lot at our last meeting about Article 13. And, you know, at the end there, we took a vote where Select Board voted to support the article, as was written 3-2. I think I did mess up the ordering of what motions we voted on and whatnot. So, I mean, the impression I kind of came away with here is the board enthusiastically supported the proposal, right? But that's not really reflected in the vote that was taken here, so I just wanted to open up to the board of, I mean, I don't want to have, go into the, you know, repeating all the things we talked about at our last meeting, but, you know, I have in mind potentially we would take another stab at voting this, so, because I don't know if that really reflects how the board really feels on it.
I'm comfortable with my vote.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm just getting out. I guess I did, but I didn't really mean to vote. I agree. That night, I thought that we should take the short term, the two categories on the right, and put those in operation budget. Right? That's what I thought. I'm fine. I know that bond council has said it's all fine to pay for all of that, so I'm fine. So no, I do want to support the article. So I would revote if I assume I'm the other I was the other one, right?
Yes.
Against? Okay,
Yeah.
so I support it.
Tim?
You're going to vote against the article just because of that piece?
I'm in favor of putting this before town meeting, and I think, I've been clear on that, I think. And, yeah,
But you told the blog you were all in favor of this.
I did not say that. I said I was in favor of placing this before town meeting. That is a big difference.
But I thought, forget the two last columns, right? I thought that was your issue, was those two last columns, that you did come around to thinking that we should do the full 25K, 25.
I'm in favor of placing the $25 million borrowing before town meeting for debate.
Now,
That's different from supporting the article. If you like, I will change to an abstain.
Well, but this would be nice to have you, if we can find a way for you to come around. What is it specifically you disagree with, the last two columns?
Yeah, you know, we passed, I don't want to go down this road.
Is routine maintenance?
The thing that's, I mean, I'm just being practical. First, advisory already voted on the budget, we'd have to change, you know, and that was what was in the article. So I just want to get this done, I want these roads to get fixed, so I'm willing to agree that this works. I'd rather do it the way you and I talked about, but I don't want this article to fail.
I was gonna say, I'm aligned with I don't like it where it is, but I think it's easiest to support it as it sits, which is why I said yes last meeting. But my comment along with this would be, next year, we should definitely move the operational items over, but I don't think that we should change anything today, just because I think it's gonna be too complicated for town meeting to digest if we change anything. That's why I was in the camp of supporting it as it sits.
I had a question about it too. In terms of putting it on the town meeting floor, this diagram, the 2026 pavement management implementation plan, is this going to be publicly available to the town meeting?
I think that, and I'm going to, either tonight or tomorrow, make sure we're good so that combination of Jason Malinowski as the capital chair and Bill Cundiff are making sure they get their presentation into the town clerk in time to show on the screen, but I think what we talked about is there will be a presentation from
This
the
is
two
part
them.
of Bill's
And
presentation?
yes, that will be.
Okay,
So,
Is it a handout, though?
It should be a handout.
Yes.
definitely,
Okay.
All right.
definitely.
Someone told him that night to make sure that this is.
Yeah, I did,
handout.
yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, someone said that.
like
Nobody
the,
said yes.
resident inquiry we got today that I think I caught, that's an exact example of where it'd be good so that people will see this.
We should try to get out ahead of time, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that's pretty essential, but I support asking for the whole amount.
All right, so then I think it makes sense for us to take another stab at this, the vote, all right?
Go for it.
Okay, so I move that the select board support at town meeting Article 13 as printed in the warrant.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
Trying to be nice
Okay,
on my way out.
all right, so it's, thank you, Al.
I
All
agree.
right. Last item on the agenda is approve the debt exclusion ballot questions on the May 12 annual town meeting, not town meeting, annual town election. Jay Tallerman has reviewed these,
And bond counsel.
and bond counsel. They reflect the language that's in the warrant. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Is there a threshold of a debt number that we have agreed to that a debt exclusion has to meet to be one of these questions, just as a general concept?
Generally, it's, if it's too big it's, if the debt service would put us in danger of requiring a 2.5 override. I think that's the broad rule.
There was, I'm looking at Brian, and he's avoiding me. We had a list of all the debt exclusions we've seen over the years, and the numbers are all over the place. You know, there's some small amounts, and there was some bigger amounts. So I don't necessarily think there's a threshold either way. I think Al may be closer to the truth. But
Yeah.
Brian, didn't we had a list of that over the years, so Tim, if you want, we can forward that to you, just so you can get an idea. But again, it looks a little haphazard. There's no set minimum.
My only comment about this, I don't think I have any problem right now with what we see in front of us, but this debt exclusion is just like a slippery slope of approving more and more outside of the cap. So I think that we should just think about these when we go forward to why are they here and what's the number, and, can we truly not fit it versus just let it be a way around the cap.
Well, one thing I think we have in an indirect way thought about it is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the NERI question. At the most recent special town meeting, the town meeting voted to approve borrowing that money regardless of whether it was exempted from Prop 2. So that's going forward no matter what. The rest of these, at least 3 and 4, are dependent on them being positive vote on a debt exclusion.
Yeah, I'm just warning that this is kind of like a way to kind of circumvent the cap in one way or another.
Tim, you generally can't put debt within the cap. That's why you have the ability to do this. It's very rare that you're going to put a large amount of debt within a,
Well, when the
Within the
taxpayers ask, because I asked the same question too, and it took me a long time to get an understanding of this, so I'm only saying it now just because I'm sure people are watching, is that this is sort of a way that this year-on-year debt increase does affect your year-on-year taxes, and it doesn't sit within the cap, so you can't really do anything about it once it's approved. So it's just there, and it just is higher. So it's more about the year-on-year increases where this excluded debt sits. So I support the things that we have to do right now. I support the debt exclusion today, but it does add up over time.
I know that's a fair point. Okay, I move that we approve the debt exclusion questions on the May 12, 2026 ballot.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. I move that we adjourn.
Second. Yay.